Director of the New Mexico Technology Council. And on with me is Mary Tiemann, my wonderful co-pilot and colleague, who is our Community Affairs and Membership Director. So we're really thrilled to have MyChelle today, and I'll have to not mess around with my pointer. Really thrilled to have MyChelle today to talk with us about communicating results to your stakeholders, the public and elected officials for big data. Key elements in communicating performance results. I really liked her outline, knowing the desired outcome before you begin, explaining the methodology, presenting the data. So again, thank you so much, MyChelle. We're thrilled to have you today.
I'm excited to be here.
So I think most of you are familiar with the New Mexico Technology Council. We're a member-led organization committed to supporting the state's vibrant tech ecosystem through networking, valuable programming, and professional development, such as this session. Public policy advocacy, we've been watching and following all the legislative activities. It's been another long, strange road for, I think, so many of those that are regularly involved. Workforce development and targeted promotion. We have our monthly peer groups, like this one, big data and AI, cybersecurity, women in technology and 3D printing. Our signature events, Women in Technology Awards, which will be coming up a little bit late this spring, but in June, and our Experience IT conference. Again, policy advocacy, and we've been doing weekly updates during the legislative session, and then promoting our members. And so if you're not a member and are interested in learning more and visiting with us, please contact Mary Tiemann, mary@nmtechcouncil.org. We're so privileged and grateful to have wonderful supporters, including the city of Albuquerque, Fat Pipe New Mexico, Fat Pipe Albuquerque. That's where I am actually enjoying my office space today, and like I do on most days. So if you're interested in a co-location shared workspace and ready to get out of the house, be sure and contact Lisa at Fat Pipe. Comcast, Richard Feynman Center from Los Alamos, Department of Information Technology. As you can see, we've got a wonderful representation of companies, and thank you all who support us, and we couldn't do it without you. So we have a wonderful peer group committee and focused on deepening the understanding, providing great speakers like we have been having, as I mentioned, Cesar with MyChelle today, fostering collaboration within the field and really helping us bring awareness to the data-driven world. Michael Maestas is our chair from Sage Core Technologies. MyChelle Andrews, we're thrilled to have her as a new member of the committee. Tony Corrado, again, an amazing genius, IBM retired executive who brings us so many wonderful connections. Brooke McBurney and Eric Meckenbauer from Meckenbauer IT. And of course, the illustrious Andrew Padilla from Data Safety. So just so you can take a look, a number of our upcoming events. We have an inaugural event this Thursday, Women in 3D Printing, brought to us by our board member, Sarah Bourdet. She is bringing this to it's a national organization. She's bringing it to New Mexico. So that'll be Thursday at 4. Women in Technology peer group led by Renee Moya with Robert Half Technology, does a fantastic job. Thursday, March 25th. And then our next big data peer group, we're thrilled to have Stacy Timmons, who will be joining us, who I think is actually on today. So thank you so much, Stacy, for joining us. And now I'm going to stop the share while Andrew Padilla introduces MyChelle.
Thanks, Deborah. So on behalf of the NMTC Big Data and AI Peer Group, we'd like to thank you for attending today's presentation. With that, allow me to introduce today's presenter, MyChelle Andrews. MyChelle Andrews is a data architect for the city of Albuquerque, responsible for business analytics, providing information to the citizens of Albuquerque and city employees. Through the city's Open Data Initiative, MyChelle is helping to revolutionize the way citizens interact with government. As a corporate leader and entrepreneur, MyChelle has unique insights into business, relationships, and the community. As an IT professional, she has built a successful career in the male-dominated field. In her more than 3 decades as an IT professional, she has seen the benefits of creating positive working relationships with her internal clients by putting her clients first, understanding their needs, and through clear communication, MyChelle has become the go-to IT person. And with that, allow me to introduce MyChelle Andrews.
Hi, everyone. I just want to make sure you can see my screen. Fantastic. You found the data, created the model, created the extract, transformation, and load process, and completed your analysis. For most of us, this is the process that we're most familiar with and where we spend most of our time. It's in our comfort zone and what we're really good at. But what's next? What do you do now? Esteemed colleagues, today we'll discuss how we communicate our results to our stakeholders. I am MyChelle Andrews, lead data architect for the city of Albuquerque, and I have been with the city for 14 years. I've been in the industry for over 35, and yes, I started when I was a baby. Over the years, I've seen how a wonderful message can be lost because the person communicating the message was uncomfortable commuting outside the technology arena. After today's presentation and our time together, I hope you will have a better understanding of what goes into communicating your results. Before we can communicate our message, we must first look at our stakeholders. Depending upon your industry or the project that you're working on, your stakeholders will differ. You'll have your project sponsor, the person who's probably paying for your project, the C-suite and mid-level managers, the people who you have to convince your project is on track and headed in the correct direction and producing the results that you're hoping for. You also have your mid-level managers, the public. Depending upon where you are in your industry, the public may or may not have a big impact. For me at the city of Albuquerque, the public is one of my primary stakeholders. After all, I am here to serve the public. We also have our elected and appointed officials and the media. You may have some or all of these stakeholders. Each of these stakeholders will have a different perspective about your project.
Can you hear me? You're on mute. Do you hear me?
Yes, Lenny,
Okay.
you're on.
Sorry, yeah, I was on my phone.
Yeah, I know. Hey, remote. Hey, this is what we're doing.
You see mouse moving, it's like
That's what
did I
happened.
talk?
I had a call come in. I said, "Oh shoot, I don't believe it," and I had to take it. Had to take a call. I've got to
Lenny,
multitask.
you're not on mute.
If
All right, well, hey,
everyone,
thank you.
hello? If everyone could mute, please.
Great, thank you. So depending upon where you're at in your project, each of these players can make a big difference in how you communicate your project. But you need to understand your audience. So let's go to look at who our audience could be made up of. You have the data wizard. This is the person who understands data, understands the process, and wants to delve deep into what information is that you're presenting. You have the naysayer, the person who's not going to believe you no matter how much work or effort you've put into this project or into communicating your message. And you have the true believer. They're there, they believe in your cause, they believe in everything about you, and they're going to support you no matter what. You have the journalist. This is an interesting stakeholder because depending upon the story they're trying to tell, they may support or not support you and your message. Then you have the public. They care about the issue. They want to know the facts. They want to know how what you're going to do impacts them, what you found and how that can impact the information and how they feel about this particular issue. And you have the supporter. No matter whether you're delivering a good message, a bad message, showing progress or the lack of progress, They're going to be there to support you no matter what. Sometimes it's hard to know who will actually be in your audience and what their level of understanding of data will be. You should always be prepared for each of the following types of audience members. How will you address their questions? Each type will ask something different. Are you prepared? Now that we understand who our stakeholders are and who our audience members are, we need to look at the message that we're going to deliver. You want to start with the end in mind. What do you want your audience to know, feel, or do? An example of what you want your audience to know. We've increased our customer service satisfaction by 33%, or the costs have been reduced by 10%. You may want your audience to feel the impact that your research has on children's lives and what will happen if you don't fund the project that our research supports funding. Or you may want to feel good about the project being brought in under budget, on time, or exceeding expectations. Your do list example could be donating time to adult literacy programs or supporting that bill when it comes up for a vote. Or you might want someone to fund the project that your research supports. Once you understand how you want your audience to know, what you want your audience to know, feel, or do after you share your information, you can build those points that convey that result. Because you know who your stakeholders are and you know the makeup of your audience, you may want to then make sure that you understand those results. Because if you don't understand the results that you're wanting to produce, how will you know if you're going to communicate your message appropriately? Not every audience member or not every time you give a presentation will you want to deliver the same level of information. That detail will vary. Not all audiences require the same level. Consider your audience, the level of detail that they need, and then you can start to develop the points that you want to make. Depending upon the amount of time you have, your points and the number of points that you are going to present will vary. On average, it's good to present 1 point with 3 subpoints every 5 to 7 minutes, with 1 point not taking any longer than 10 minutes. So if you have a 45-minute presentation, given that you need 3 minutes for an introduction, 3 to 5 minutes for your close, time for questions and answers, and making your points, that means you probably will be able to make approximately 3 points, each having 3 subpoints. You want to make sure that your points that you're going to communicate instill the message that you want your audience to walk away with. At the conclusion of this analysis, you actually have your message. But as you're developing your message, and after you've got all of your points put in place and you know the subpoints that you're going to use to support the message, you have some additional aspects that you need to consider. These include the methodology used for gathering that information. I can remember one presentation where I was asked to speak to the public. We had a group like this that was evaluating the information we had to share. And of course, we had a data wizard who was in our presentation. He was interested in the nitty-gritty. He wanted to know what the architecture looked like. He wanted to know where we got our data, how we were combining it together, and what methods we were using to draw our conclusions. For me, the best way to communicate and start that dialogue with him was to share the architecture. of the data that we were gathering. It was a complicated system. It had at least 15 different sources that we were pulling data together. And then we were drawing conclusions based on how that data came together and the information that it provided. He also wanted to understand the ETL process, the extract, transform, and load process that we had, because he wanted to see if we'd really thought of all the different combinations, the quality of the data that was being presented, and how we brought all that information together. I had to be prepared to explain each of those aspects. I also then needed to be able to explain the testing and how we tested the results. How did we compare that information to our source systems? If you're doing a survey, how many people did you have in that survey and what were their individual answers? And then comparing that to the results that you received out of your survey. Or in my case, looking at 15 source systems, comparing the data as it moved through the source systems, comparing each of the results, and then tying it back to this information came from this source system, that information came from this other source system. And we were able to tie those together and see, here's what source system A said, here's what source system B said, and here's what the result came up with. And as you can see, those results match. And then did you do any insurance of the data to make sure that it made sense? After all, you may be presenting information that was presented 6 months ago, and now you're presenting an update. Do the two numbers jive? Is it really possible to have a 75% reduction in crime? Maybe not. You may have to look at your data and ensure that what you're presenting is actually giving you the information that you need and that it makes sense. If you have a gut check, like I had earlier this week, where I'd written all my methodologies for gathering the information, I was looking at the data and it just didn't feel right. I knew then that I needed to spend some additional time checking my results to verify that when I gathered my data, I'd actually done it accurately. And lo and behold, I had a problem. Thank goodness I hadn't shared that information with someone else. Another important thing to look at is, does the data that you are providing support your expected outcome? There are many reasons why you may not support the outcome that you are striving to achieve. It could be something as simple as, we've had some policy changes. You can see in 2015 where we had XY result. Now we have B and Q as our result. And that's because we changed our policy. We took the information that we were gathering in 2017 and determined that we weren't doing a good enough job of gathering the data at the source systems. We implemented policies and procedures. And because of those changes in our policies and procedures, our information changed. It's not that we have more incidents, it's that we're reporting those incidents more comprehensively and therefore have greater detail. The information that we provided in 2017 was accurate at the level we were gathering it. But now, since 2018, we've improved those processes, and therefore we're showing a more detailed level than what we were showing before. This isn't always a bad thing. It could be that now you're looking at the picture in a greater totality, ensuring that you have all of the information that you need and that you want, and that you're able to act on it. More importantly, what are you doing with that data? Other factors might be a change in personnel. In my case, when we provided the 2017 information, that was gathered, accumulated, processed by an entirely different staff who had a different level of understanding of the source systems. My level of the source systems is a year old. I don't understand how all the pieces fit together, And we had to spend over a year figuring out how all of those pieces fit together and systemizing our information so that instead of having one person read every case, we could actually systemize it and reproduce the results moving forward time and time again, no matter who our personnel were. So it doesn't matter. Did I have a personnel change? Yes, I did. Did that impact our results? Absolutely 100% it did. Because now we have a better understanding of the data, the source systems, and where all of that information came from. Once you have all of your information gathered, you've created your points, and you've put together the message that you want to share. Then you need to look at the next step, which is who's going to communicate that information. In some organizations, like the city of Albuquerque, we have a communications officer in each division. They are the ones who communicate. They may or may not have a detailed understanding of the data that they're presenting. So you need to understand who the presenter is and how versed they are in the data that they're communicating. How well do they speak? And this sometimes might ruin it for future presenters. How well do they use slang or not use slang? You know, things like, you know, kind of, like, well, sort of. Those slang words that show lazy language. They may have jargon that's been given to them that they don't understand. Are you using jargon like AI, BI, outliers, mungling, ETL? Your presenter needs to understand what each of those jargon terms are and should eliminate using jargon in your communication. I've worked hard in this presentation to not use jargon so that no matter who my audience was or what their level of detailed knowledge about my world and technology is, they would still understand my message. You also want to look at the speaker or presenter and determine their use of grammar. My biggest pet peeve is me and the analyst. Well, me never did anything. So make sure that when you're communicating your message, that you're actually communicating it with proper grammar. There's nothing worse than listening to someone who doesn't use proper language, who uses slang, and who uses jargon that you may not understand. And of course, my last pet peeve are those uhs, ers, and ahs. If the person has a presentation that's filled with, well, gosh, I'm going to lose interest and I'm going to lose the message they're trying to deliver. Make sure that doesn't happen when your message is being presented. If you're the techie nerd that's doing the presenting, like often is the case, make sure that you dumb down your communication to the level of the people that are communicating. Not that the people that you're communicating to are dumb, but that you don't want to feel like you're communicating at a level that they don't understand. Use common language. Most people are comfortable communicating at a 5th or 6th grade level. So consider that when you're building your message. Once you've determined who your communicator is going to be and who's going to do that presentation, you need to figure out how they're going to communicate. There are many options: PowerPoint, written reports, and online presentations. When you're looking at PowerPoint, this slide that I had earlier was not great. It was heavy in words. There was a lot of information there. And as the receiver of the information, you might have gotten lost as I was displaying each of the items. On the other hand, this slide is a good slide. It gives you just a few visual cues. It gives you words and icons that you can remember. After all, your audience isn't going to remember all of the information that you gave it, but they are going to remember how you made them feel. Did the person walk away with a positive outlook on the information that you presented, or was their outlook negative? because of the way it was communicated. Moving on to written report. Let me go back just a second here. Oops. When you're doing a written report, you might want to think about the visuals that you're using in this written report. In the book, Visual Display of Data of Quantitative Information, Edward Tuck refers to 3 guidelines when creating a meaningful visualization. Ink to white page ratio, the words, numbers, and drawings that are used together in one graphic, and the reflex of balance, proportion, and a sense of relative scale. Now I'll jump forward to my slide that has these demonstrations. On the left image side, you can see here the 2 different ways of communicating this information. What the information is isn't relevant in this particular example, but what is important is looking at the top image. Is it actually displaying more information than the bottom image, or is it displaying the same information? In this case, it's actually representing the same information. Depending upon the audience you're communicating to and what information you have, you may choose to use the upper image or the lower image. It just depends. I'm not going to tell you one way is better than the other, but what I do want to do is to make you start to think about, am I communicating more information than my receiving audience needs? Are they actually getting the information, or are they on overload because of the graph? On the slide next to it that shows the colored graph, this is a great graph for 2 reasons. One, it has too much ink to white page ratio. As you can see, there's no white on this particular graph, and there's a lot of lines that don't mean anything. Another example down below, when you look down at the very, very bottom, you can see down, whoops, you can see down in this lower section, going between the years of 1688 to 1701 is one amount of space. But when we move over to 1739 to 1748, 1755, and 1762, those spaces are smaller. Is that what you really want? Were those years really smaller years than the previous years? Or are you trying to prove a point by skewing the relationship of the data between one another? Obviously, the most important data on this graph represented, and we know that because of the size of the year, is the information between 1762 and 1775. But did we skew how our members or the people audience are actually viewing that information? We don't want to mislead our audience by the way we share our information. We want to make sure that we are sharing the information appropriately and ensuring that we aren't skewing the information by the way we display it, but rather allowing the information to tell the story. Are there any questions about any of the topics we've spoken about today? I see a comment from Kent. He feels the lower conveys more of the range and outliers information. From Kent, I agree with you. That lower image, and going back to that slide, this image to me is easier to understand. Are there any other comments? Questions? All right, I was anticipating a few more questions.
Hi, MyChelle, this is Cesar. I think to start off, I think the focus on the audience that you started your presentation with is key. I mean, how many times you go to a presentation where it's very clear that the person presenting the subject is very knowledgeable, really has everything that they needed to make a great presentation, but puts everything together in a way that makes sense for them and not necessarily, from the audience perspective. So I think that's right on my.
Yeah, I think one of our biggest challenges, and I'm going to use the nerd in a loving sense because I consider myself a data nerd. And I really enjoy how data can tell a story. But often that data nerd in me wants to get too much into the weeds, too much into the detail. And so that's why it's really important to take that step back and look and see, who are you communicating with and what do they need to know? Not what do you want to tell them, but what do they need to know to get the outcome that you're after? Are there any other comments?
So MyChelle, this is Tony Corrado. One thing I like that you talked about is know why you're giving the presentation. What's the point? I think that's one that people miss. And that was well brought up.
Yeah. Sometimes people get up there and just, if you're in the audience, you feel like they're talking for the sake of talking. And that's something that you don't want. We never talk just to be talking. When we're presenting information, especially data that we've spent a lot of time gathering, what is that point we want them to bring out? Anyone else?
Yeah, I think another point in presenting information to people is also knowing when you got your point across, right? That's something that I heard from a salesperson that I have a lot of respect for, who's really great at selling. And this guy was telling me how many times he's seen people lose deals because they get to the point where they heard yes, and they keep talking. And they get back to a no situation. And so knowing when you sold your fish and shut up and just take it home is super important.
And I think that's a big challenge in how we communicate right now in COVID, while we're doing most of our communicating over Zoom or an online environment, because it's hard to be able to read the audience. Right now, I have 4 other people besides myself whose facial expressions I can read. The rest of you that have your pictures and not being shown and just have your name up there, I have no idea if you're understanding the data that I'm communicating or whether or not you're even paying attention. If you're not paying attention, I need to know if I need to stop, clap my hands and gather your attention back up because I've lost you. And if I've lost you, why have I lost you? Am I getting too far into the weeds and I need to step back a little bit and think about your time? Or maybe it could be that you're actually texting this important information out to your fan base. And it's not that you're not paying attention, it's that you're hyper attentive and wanting to communicate the message that I'm sharing. So reading your audience is very key, especially now. In review, I'm going to drop my screen back up real quick. All right, did that successfully work? All right, you never are sure with technology. In reviewing what we've covered today, we're looking at, I need to see. Who are your stakeholders? Understanding who's in your audience, starting with the end in mind and the aspects to consider before communicating your message. Looking at the planning of who's going to be delivering the message and what method are they going to use to communicate that message. Moving on, I hope that this has been helpful for you and that you've come away with some pointers that you can use when you're communicating that very technical information to a not so technical audience. Again, I am MyChelle Andrews, and I will leave my contact information up. Narissa, hopefully I said that correctly. She had a comment that she also thought it was less distractive to mute your video when watching a presentation. Yes, and that's true. It's that balance between knowing when to have your camera on and not have your camera on that's so critical.
Yes, it's been interesting watching a lot of these presentations, and then just people movement. I guess I'm a visual person, so I'm like, what? Why are things moving? So I mute my video just to not be a distraction for other people because I fidget too. So,
right.
But it wasn't that I was not listening. I thought it was a great presentation, and I echo the thoughts of everyone else.
I know,
And it was actually.
great.
I'm excited for the video recording too, because I'm working on a presentation with a set of people for an audience that we're really unfamiliar with, and we were trying to get out of our own heads. So I plan to forward this on and see, this is the thing. So thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. And a little trick that you can use sometimes, and it makes it a little harder unless you know your keystrokes really well, is being able to, when you're doing a lot of speaking about a slide that you just shown, taking that slide away and not sharing your desktop. But that can get tricky, switching back and forth, because it is important to know if your audience is actually there and gathering the information you have. All right, Deborah, thank you so much for this opportunity to share the information.
Absolutely, MyChelle. Thank you so much. You know what I thought would be interesting. So you have quite a few stakeholders between, probably making presentations to the mayor and the city council, as well as the general public.
And the media.
And the media, yeah, given, and I thought it would be interesting if you could just, if you could share a few of those stories with us of your experiences.
Well, I find that going through the process that I did helps me to make sure I'm communicating the correct information, especially when you're, like, for example, communicating with the media. That's when it's really, really critical to look at what was presented before, what am I presenting now, how is it different, and why is it different? Because they're going to ask, because they're going to come to your press conference knowing what you said before. It may not have been you that said it, but it was said on behalf of the organization that you are representing. So what did they say? Do my numbers support that? And if they don't, making sure that you're prepared to give why. We have a perfect example with the city of Albuquerque and the APD, the Albuquerque Police Department. We, at one point, were communicating information based on a system that was the system that was being used to record an incident while it was happening, while the investigation was happening. During an investigation, if any of you have watched different crime shows, you know that your information changes. The deeper you dig, the more you learn. And that information in that system changed as they were learning more information. So what might have started out as, let's say, a domestic violence case could have ended up in just an assault case. And when I say just, I don't mean that one is more grievous than the other, but in something that was different. And so those numbers would change. We determined as a group that we needed to be communicating our results after the incident was closed, because having data change can be confusing. Well, before you said you had 45 homicides, when in fact, one of them ended up being a suicide. So that removes that. So your number can't be going down because there aren't less dead people. Well, you have to understand what that means. We decided that we were going to wait and communicate our results after the information had been thoroughly vetted, had been closed, the case had been closed, and it had been moved to a different system, which is the system that we communicate with the FBI with. Those FBI numbers get published, but you have to understand when the FBI publishes their numbers, they publish it one time based on the information the first time you give it to them. So if something changed and you had more cases that closed, say at the end of the year, you were investigating what appeared to be a suicide, but then it actually became a homicide, or vice versa, your number will change after the FBI has published it, because once that case closes, you then know what really happened. And some cases can take 1, 2, 3, 5 years before it's actually closed. So the numbers are always changing. So even though we are presenting the information at the time, that's still a point in time after the current investigations that have closed have been sent to the FBI, but before any open investigations have closed. So that's a big key. That's why understanding your data and what you're communicating is so critical. I think another one's when you're communicating with the public, because they too are going to remember what you said before, and they're going to want to understand, why is it taking so long to get that information? It's a case we have right at the moment. Why is it taking so long to get this information? Once they understood that we were pulling from 15 to 18 different source systems, each having their own way of gathering information, bringing it all together and producing one final result at the end, they had a better understanding, and I believe a little more sympathy for us and how long it was taking. Because with each system, we had to do all of that data validation. We had to understand how to model the data. Our clients were not as knowledgeable in the cause and effect of data being entered in one system and how it ended up in another system. And so we all had a learning curve getting to know that information and how and what that information represented. And so those are things that really are important to communicate that you may not understand, you need to communicate up front. But once people have a better understanding of the process, then they feel that you actually are covering all of the bases and have a little more faith in the information that you're providing.
That's terrific. That's terrific. And as a non-data user, that's why I was kind of like, tell me some stories and give me some examples, or non-data expert.
Well, and for the city of Albuquerque, you know, we often have our PO, our communications officer, our public relations officer, whatever each group wants to call them, that's doing the communication. And so they don't know how the data has changed unless you prep them. So that's why understanding who's presenting the data is so critical. Because if it's someone who's communicating the data, say the owner of a company is communicating something to his client, and he's not intimately knowledgeable of the ins and outs of the process that they went through, he may be asked a question he can't answer. That doesn't look good for him, and you aren't going to look good after because you didn't prep him properly. So that's why it's more about being prepared and ensuring the person is prepared when you're doing the communication so that your message doesn't get lost, because too often the message gets lost and you're not able to actually communicate what is necessary because you weren't prepared.
So Ken, you mentioned a data science cohort. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
The what?
I was reaching out to Ken Gustafson. He had a comment in our chat.
Oh, hi. Thank you. Thank you for presenting today. Oh, there goes my audio again. Sorry.
Oh, that's what mine does sometimes too. I echo.
Oh, hi. Thanks so much. Yeah, I'm a participant in the CNM deep dive data science cohort here, and we a lot of great information here. Appreciate it, MyChelle. Really good. So I'm going to be redoing my upcoming presentation. I might be reaching out to you for some data if you don't mind. So if you could drop your contact in the chat, I'd appreciate that. Thanks so much.
Hopefully it's a data that we've already vetted, because I just have to let you know, I know this isn't about open data. However, when someone requests a new data set be shared, we actually go through an intense vetting process to verify that the data that we'll be sharing is actually accurate and that our source systems are good source systems. So hopefully it's something that we already have available.
Okay, great. Yeah, thank you so much.
Anyone else, any comments or scenarios to share? I'll be happy to call on you, Mr. Reynolds. Mark Reynolds from UNM, he's constantly collecting all sorts of smart building work and information.
Quick question, MyChelle. How do you feel that this topic fits into professional development for a technology professional? Because oftentimes, the scope of the development is around hard skills and not so much these types of skills. Have you incorporated that in the city of Albuquerque? What do you think its role is? I think oftentimes people that are on the business side assume this is tacit knowledge from the technology side, and they're in a completely different world. So there's a big disconnect that I've seen. Can you comment on that?
Absolutely. I think part of the success in my career and my over 35 years experience in IT is because of my communication skills. My hard skills are good, but I also have equally good communication skills. So that allows me to take the concepts and ideas that we're developing on the technology side and communicate them. At the city of Albuquerque, especially in our IT group, I'll put a shout out for Brian Osterloh, who, in my opinion, is one of the best bosses I've ever had in my entire 35 years. And well, actually it's 37, but we won't go there. Years of experience working in IT. He supports professional development around communication. We have 2 Toastmasters groups at the city of Albuquerque, both of which are supported not just by technology and innovation. We happen to have, oh, I can't even think off the top of my head, Del, how many we have that are in Toastmasters, but we also have Toastmasters incorporated in our pre-management development program for developing our future leaders and ensuring that they have the communication skills necessary. I find that often the pull between providing good customer service and the technology nerd that doesn't like to go from behind the computer is where we have our biggest rub. And if we can work on getting those people who don't necessarily have day-to-day contact with the end user, for example, the system side, the networking side, the people that provide PC support, they don't always go out and have to communicate with the public or communicate messages, but yet if they just had a little more understanding of the importance of communication, they would not be seen quite so nerdy, geeky, whatever word it is you want to use, and being not customer service oriented. And if they had that communication skill, they would see the connection between the end user, the people who we are truly serving, which in the city's case is twofold. We serve, yes, all of the employees of the city, but we also serve the public. And making sure that both understand that we care and that we have the ability to understand what their needs are, which only happens through communication, is where those communication skills really pay off. And having our technical people have more of those soft skills is so critical.
Yeah, we also have a number of folks from Rio Grande Credit Union. Roy, I'll pick on you since you've have your camera on. You're the CFO, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And so you can understand that, relate to that, right? When you're presenting the financials to board members or customers, that kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. When MyChelle talked about code, we call them code words in banking or credit union, you know, like ACH, debits, credits. It's very important to know your audience. Our audiences are board members. They're former city employees, former county employees. They know what they know, but then I know what I know. So you always have to know your audience. And then the what do they always say? Statistics lie, or lies always? There's always lies in statistics. So you always have to be aware of how your data is presented. I just got off a discussion with another employee and to check your data presentation, because I've lost a lot of board members over my years, MyChelle, because of punctuation. They get trapped up, and you're like, that's not what we're talking about. It's like, well, I don't care. It's important to me. And you're like, you kind of lost everybody. So definitely having your presentation even review just for something as little as 9,000, and it's all bunched up, and the next number has the proper comma. So anyway, that is very important. So
Terrific.
And spell check isn't always your friend. I have severe dyslexia, and that is a challenge for me in the communications world, because you can spell the wrong word right. And that's bitten me a few times. And that too is something that people who have misused words or misspelled words that jump off their page, gosh, I wish I had that superpower, because I just don't. But that's what they focus on. You are absolutely right.
And Mark Reynolds. Hi, Mark. Great to see you today.
How are you? Yeah, I was on
Good
two
afternoon.
meetings. Unfortunately, on two meetings at the same time, or triple. That's the problem with all of us is, I've been on one meeting on one PC, one meeting on my phone, listening to the earbuds and listening to this one at the same time. So to follow up on Roy said and what you were saying about us, growing up in the IT field from boots on the ground of being an old telephone guy back in the Autobahn days. Nobody knows what that is, but that's Air Force Communications. Going to New Mexico Tech, where you have the boots on the ground approach in the trades, and then you work your way up, and you work in higher education. You're expected to have this, professional, some type of degree, whatever, and that makes you knowledgeable about how to be a supervisor and makes you knowledgeable how to work in the IT field. And it's not that way. You can have the smartest PhD in the room, and they can't tell you how to tie their shoes because they're so far out there thinking about tomorrow, which is great. You need those entrepreneurs, but when you need that simple conversation, whether it's baby boomers like myself talking to other baby boomers or talking to the X, the Y, the Z, or whatever the new generation is, there is a dysfunction, and you don't know how to convey to them that. They want to tell you they want to go be a boss right away. And you're saying, well, when I was, it's my dad's conversation, right? When I was your age and I had to do blah, blah, blah. And as soon as you say that, you've already lost them. They're like, this is noise. I don't, you text me what you need me to do. And when I first got into the business working with, again, I'm a telephone person with my background in engineering. And then I got involved in IT. And when I met, and no disrespect for any IT people on here, but as I went through the IT, it was a different way of doing business. So in the telephone world, we fix it until it's done. I don't care if it was 5 a.m, we fix it until it's done. When I got in the business of working with IT, because I actually did IT and telephone and security and engineer design. And when I broke it off, like coming to UNM and you start to work with IT professionals, it's a different dynamic because to them, you tell me what you need from A to C. I don't care about D and beyond. You just tell me what you need. And if I can't get it done in this frame, I'll do it tomorrow. You're like, no. You need to help me finish this now, or I can't do what I need to do. So the dynamic of the differences in working in those environments is sometimes as big as the Rio Grande. I mean, it's huge. And then there's other ones where you finally find a group that works well together, and wow, the amount of talent you have in one room just blows me away. But you're right, we're in the communications business, and I think that's where we fail 99% of the time. We don't know how to communicate and say it in layman's terms. We don't know how to listen because we want to tell you, because we become narcissists telling you exactly how we know it works rather than listening to you. So I applaud when I actually have a breakthrough with somebody that is willing to listen and I can listen to them. I have a breakthrough because I'm like, wow, we've done it, so thank you.
Terrific. Thanks so much, Mark. So Paige, I was gonna give you a shout out anyways, and you put a note in the chat. So why don't you share with the group the great work that you're doing? Paige Prescott, she is on our board and is the founder of the Computer Science Alliance and trying to get computer science I always summarize as a requirement for high school graduation, if you can believe that it's not. Like how outdated is that? So anyways, Paige, thank you so much for all of your continued hard work.
Thanks, Deborah, and thanks, MyChelle, and others. So I'm working to increase computer science in our schools through 2 ways, through teacher professional development, and then also, well, I guess 3, advocacy and policy. And then the other one is through my hat with Supercomputing Challenge, which is a STEM competition. And what we're doing with Supercomputing Challenge right now is we have a professional learning community of teachers around New Mexico that are interested in data science education and resources that they can start to bring to their students. My vision would be that in high school that there would be a data literacy component. I know there's a financial literacy bill going through, but how about data literacy as like a larger concept, and that they learn tools that you all are using professionally, but maybe at an age appropriate level. And that's something that if any of you ever see resources that are of an education value, K-12, or would ever want to connect to educators around the work that you do in data science, I'd be definitely interested in sharing that or connecting on that level. So thanks. And hopefully we can grow the pipeline of people in New Mexico that can be resources for you and future employees, et cetera. So thanks.
I think the
and
work
thank
you're
you,
doing is
Cesar,
super-
for sharing that. Mm-hmm.
Oh, I think this work is super important in educating people. Over the last several years, being part of a predictive analytics company, I've had a lot of people coming to me, even like friends and family members coming to me. Oh, my son is getting into data science or wants to get into data science. And people know, one, there are lots of jobs, and two, they tend to pay well. But that's it. They really have no idea what does a data scientist really do. And is that something that I would be happy doing? And I think having that be part of the educational curriculum is key.
Any other comments, feedback for Paige? Thanks so much, Paige. All right, Jason Johnson, you snuck on. Oh, Nerissa has to run. Nerissa, thanks so much for joining us. Thanks, everybody.
I was listening.
Cute, bye-bye.
Jason Johnson, he's our fabulous Deputy CIO at the State Department of Information Technology. I always call out my buddy, Jason.
We're always doing this.
I know, just like.
Anyhow, it's good information. Thank you for the presentation. I think that you're on point with many items in there. And so, yeah, it's all, I think one of the things for technology people, I hear it time and time again, is communication. We under communicate. We don't communicate at a level that people can understand. We don't tell the good work that we're doing. We're always running around fixing stuff. So we're really trying to work on putting out things that we have achieved and, focus on the goals and the gains as well. So all this stuff is really important. The common dialogue, understanding your audience, who you're talking to, get to their level, define, come to core terms. I start many conversations. All right, let's do a baseline. What do you mean by this? Because we have different perceptions of what we think we know. So anyhow, thank you for the conversations.
Thanks, Jason. MyChelle, I could turn it back to you. Do you have any final closing comments? Anybody else, any comments?
Just thank you so much. I appreciate the ability to share with all of you. I'm very passionate about this. I am a distinguished Toastmaster through the Toastmasters program and a speech coach. And so it's something that I think is an area that we all need to work on, especially in my given profession, which is technology.
Terrific. Well, thanks so much, everybody. I hope you have a great day. Thanks, MyChelle. Thank you again to our Big Data Peer Group Committee that helps us put it all together, our board members who could join us today, and everyone else. So we'll have the recording available and we'll be happy to share it with you. So thanks, everybody. Have a great day.
Thank you, MyChelle.
Bye, everyone.